Now, in part one of this presentation, we discussed the various personalities, the key players of the Dulce underground base conspiracy. That was part one. Now, we're going into part two. Let's talk about a very important person, Gabe Valdez. The late Gabe Valdez was a retired New Mexico State Patrol officer who was in charge of the Dulce area for many years, from the late 1970s to the late 1980s. He passed away on August 6, 2011, at his residence in Albuquerque. Now, Valdez claimed that the government was most likely responsible for the cattle mutilations which started happening from around 1975. Now, he claimed that the government may have begun to periodically monitor the radiation levels of certain cattle some years later, after the 1967 underground nuclear explosion, which was called Project Gas Buggy, which took place about 22 miles southwest of Dulce. Valdez also stated that the government staged several UFO incidents in the Dulce area, the Archuleta Mesa, etc., by the use of high-tech equipment such as prototype of holographic image projections, as well as unmanned aerial vehicle or remotely controlled platforms that were made to resemble flying saucers. Now, Valdez believed that the bio-warfare experiments were conducted at Dulce and that UFO alien stories were concocted by the government, a cover story to conceal various black projects in the area. Now, this is the late Gabe Valdez. Now let's talk about another personality, William Bill Moore. Now it was Moore who first propagated or revived the story about Roswell in 1980, when he, together with Charles Berlitz, published the book Incident at Roswell. Until this book came out, most Americans had no interest or knowledge about the Roswell incident, since it was long forgotten and dismissed as misidentification by the U.S. Army in 1947. William L. Moore claimed that around the same time that he began to propagate the Roswell story, he was working with Richard C. Doty of Kirtland Air Force Base and participated in a disinformation ploy to saturate Paul Benowitz, who was pursuing his independent investigations on Dulce, with false information on the Dulce base. This he claimed in a 1989 MUFON conference that took place in Las Vegas, Nevada. However, there's no verifiable documentation whatsoever that Moore participated in such disinformation ploy in any official capacity, except for his verbal confessions that he made at the 1989 MUFON conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now let's talk briefly about Richard C. Doty. Initially, he was with Kirtland Air Force Base, Air Force Office of Special Investigations around 1979, 1980, and 1981 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He claimed that he participated in disinformation in official capacity along with Moore. But again, there's no documentation that he participated in such disinformation ploy at Kirtland Air Force Base in any official capacity, even though Paul Benowitz's name and Doty's name appear on one or two Kirtland OSI documents, because Kirtland Air Force Base invited Paul Benowitz to testify to what he allegedly was seeing over the Manzano storage area. Now later on, Richard C. Doty became a promoter of the Serpo project, which some researchers seem to describe as being a total fabrication. Now, Project Camelot seems to have bought Doty's story hook, line, and sinker. After leaving AFOSI at Kirtland, Doty started working as a New Mexico State Highway Patrol officer, and he lived in Grants and still lives in Grants, New Mexico after retirement. Now let's talk a little bit about Phil Schneider. Now Phil Schneider was never a part of the initial Dulce base rumors. Apparently he must have read many articles concerning the alleged Dulce base by the time he came out into the scene in 1995 and started giving lectures. It was said that in 1989, in one of the early interviews, Bob Lazar allegedly claimed that there was an altercation between the U.S. military and alien entities in an underground installation, but Lazar never specified any location. Phil Schneider also heard about the Bob Lazar story. And apparently, knowing that no one had yet come up with any claim of personal involvement in the alleged 1979 altercation, he conveniently cast himself into the scene, claiming that he was a survivor of the Dulce Wars. In other words, Schneider hijacked Bob Lazar's claims and made himself a protagonist in the Dulce War story. Now, the most sane person, surprisingly, may have been Paul Benowitz himself and Gabe Valdez. Now, it is quite possible that Paul Benowitz had long only pretended that he had been brainwashed by some within the AFOSI while he continued to conduct his own investigations into Dulce. But nevertheless, he couldn't himself overcome his growing paranoia. Another possible scenario may have been that there was a dissension among the AFOSI, and an element among the group may have accidentally provided Benowitz with some crucial information on alleged crash of a U.S. military's prototype stealth aircraft near Mount Archuleta. Now, I would encourage everyone to read a very interesting article entitled "The Dulce Base May Not Physically Exist, but Paraphysical Phenomena Seem to Haunt Dulce, New Mexico." Thank you so much for watching this video, including part 1 of this Dulce underground base conspiracy, The Key Players. This is Norio Hayakawa in Albuquerque, New Mexico.